Hi, I'm Leonard, and I know some of you are studying for the GED Extended Response Essay. These are written responses that determine in part whether you pass or fail the GED exam. The score you receive on the extended response depends on the strength of your writing, of course, but also on how well you can follow instructions in the prompt. In this lesson, I will write an argument according to a prompt similar to what you will find on the exam. You can watch me while I write it. When I write an essay, I always use the plan, draft, evaluate, submit process. Planning always starts with reading the prompt carefully and asking, what am I being asked to do? Here's the prompt for this essay. Store managers of Creelan Cellular are meeting to decide whether to change company policy. The change, if implemented, would allow Creelan Cellular store employees the option of voting on whether their store manager would schedule 8-hour shifts or 10-hour shifts. The passages below are arguments of two managers, each attempting to persuade other managers to agree with his position. Read both passages and write a response describing with evidence why one of the arguments is more effective than the other. Be sure to write an argument about which passage is more effective and not about which policy you yourself would prefer. Use textual evidence to support your claim. You have 45 minutes to complete your response. Okay, so that was the prompt. What am I being asked to do here? I'm going to look for doing words, verbs. This prompt is asking me to read both passages and write a response describing with evidence why one of the arguments is more effective than the other. Okay, so I need to evaluate both arguments, determine which is stronger, then write a response that supports my claim using text from the passages. The first step is to figure out which passage is stronger. For that, I'll use the star support strategy, but a little differently. Remember that the star support strategy is a way to evaluate evidence based on how specific, timely, accurate, and relevant it is. The more the evidence is specific, timely, accurate, and relevant, the stronger and more effective that evidence is. I made a chart for myself for just these types of assignments. I use this chart to track which essay is stronger. I'll start by reading both passages. Employees at each of our retail stores should be able to vote to decide whether their store will allow employees to work 4 10-hour shifts instead of 5 8-hour shifts. Adopting this policy aligns with our values of supporting positive work-life balance for our employees and listening to ideas that employees bring forward to management. Many companies have found that offering 410s as an option to employees has boosted morale, decreased employee sick days, and made scheduling for open and close times easier for managers. Employees come in rested from 3 days off and are ready to work hard. This translates into better customer interactions and higher customer satisfaction rates and higher sales. In fact, Faster Cellular put this policy to a vote last year and reports that the stores utilizing 4 10-hour shift scheduling show over a 20% increase in sales revenue. If this doesn't show a return on investment, I don't know what does. Some people may think that allowing employees to vote on the length of the shifts amounts to the manager giving away power and authority. However, I think it is precisely the opposite. Allowing employees this flexibility creates trust and goodwill. This makes the store not only a better place to work, but also a better place to shop. I've had many managers discuss this issue with me and are in agreement that adopting the policy is not only the right thing to do for our employees, but for our business as well. Okay, so now I'm being asked to decide which manager has the stronger argument. I know that I, personally, prefer working 5 8-hour shifts. 10-hour shifts make for very long days. But I have to remember, I'm not being asked to write about my opinion on the subject. I'm writing about which argument is stronger and explaining why, using evidence from the texts. Let's see what the other passage has to say. I have been with Creelan Cellular over 15 years, and I started as a sales representative in one of our retail stores. From the time I started, my goal was to advance to store manager and beyond, and I have. One of the motivators for me to become a store manager was that I would have the ability to make decisions for my employees and my store. Taking away this power from the store managers lessens their authority and makes them less able to adapt to their store's specific needs. We should listen to employees, true, but this company has been successful because of the decisions of decision makers, managers, and other corporate leaders who can make a business case for the policies we put in place. A company is not a democracy, and we should not pretend that it is. By acting like it is, we risk losing the competitive edge we've shown for years. If we do this now, what's next? Wearing miniskirts and tank tops to work? Managers should maintain the flexibility to make all final scheduling decisions for their own stores. Right away I noticed some similarities. Both of the speakers are managers. The other similarity I see is that they both are talking about whether or not to allow employees to vote on having 8 or 10-hour shifts. Whenever I analyze an argument, I always look for its claim first, because without a claim, there is no argument. I need to know what the speaker is trying to prove. Second, I analyze the speaker. I do this because without a reliable and trustworthy speaker, I can't move forward to evaluate any evidence they may present. I can only trust the evidence of an argument to the extent that I can trust the speaker. The third thing I do, after evaluating the claim and speaker, I use the STAR support strategy to evaluate the evidence. After using STAR support strategy to analyze the evidence, I always check for fallacies. I check for fallacies last because usually in the process of evaluating the speaker and evidence, fallacies become evident. Looking for fallacies last helps me recognize any fallacy I hadn't already noticed by analyzing the claim, speaker, and evidence. I can also see just how much the fallacy deflates, weakens, or destroys the argument. I like to call fallacies the argument killer because a strong argument can be squashed quickly by a fallacy. So, let's get started. The claim. Claim. Where's the claim in the first argument? Here it is. Employees at each of our retail stores should be able to vote to decide whether their store will allow employees to work 4 10-hour shifts instead of 5 8-hour shifts. Not surprisingly, it's close to the beginning of the argument. And the second passage? Its claim is here at the very end. Managers should maintain the flexibility to make all final scheduling decisions for their own stores. Well, not too surprisingly, these managers are arguing the exact opposite of the other. Okay, let's see. Are the claims clear and reasonable? Yes, they are both clear. One is arguing for employees to have the option to vote on whether they want 8 or 10-hour shifts. The second one is arguing that the employees should not be allowed to vote on this. I'd say both are reasonable. They are both possible to implement. After all, there are businesses that do one and businesses that do the other. They aren't proposing that employees work 14 or 15-hour shifts or that they vote every week on what they want. Each option seems reasonable to me. So, now I know what each manager wants to prove and convince me of. Speaking of managers, what kind of people are these? Can I trust the speakers of these two arguments? I only know what they are saying here. I don't know either of them personally, so I don't have any past experience with them to help me decide. What can I tell about the first? What's important to him? Well, he talks about company values and morale, the company's competitor, and ROI, or return on investment. ROI is a measurement of how much money a person or company gets back from what they've invested. The first manager cares about flexibility and trust and has talked to other managers about their needs. I don't know his name, but I can tell that much about him. What can I tell about the second manager? Well, he doesn't have much time to speak, but he makes a point about being with the company 15 years. That's a long time. He was motivated by the opportunity to make decisions. He talks about the authority of the managers and making a business case for the decisions they make for their stores. He talks about flexibility and the dress policy. Okay. Nothing either speaker says makes me think he or she is untrustworthy, and I don't have any information that would make me doubt their intentions or their facts, so I will consider them equally trustworthy and reliable. I do think the second manager is a little off topic, bringing up the dress code, but I wouldn't say it makes him untrustworthy. Good. So, now we get to my favorite part, the evidence. To have a strong logical argument, you've got to have evidence. I know it sounds obvious, but I see claims all around me that have no evidence to back them up. Like I said, I always use the STAR support strategy to analyze evidence. For evidence, I write on my graph specific, timely, accurate, and relevant. This is where the STAR in STAR support strategy gets its name. These are the four attributes of strong evidence. I'll start with the first passage. Where's the evidence? Okay, it's here. Many companies have found that offering 410s as an option to employees has boosted morale, decreased employee sick days, and made scheduling for open and close times easier for managers. Is that specific? But he doesn't say which companies. He doesn't say how much morale was boosted. He doesn't say how they know scheduling is easier. We don't know where he got the information, from a published study, a representative in human resources, or a friend. That's not too specific. Likewise, with the better customer interactions and higher customer satisfaction rates. What is the increase? 1% or 250%? There's a big difference between the two. However, the next two pieces of evidence are specific. Faster Cellular voting to implement this policy and reporting a 20% increase in sales revenue is very specific. In the last paragraph, he's back to vague. Mini managers? What does that mean? 4? 27? I don't have any way of knowing. So let me see how specific the second manager is. He tells me he's been with the company over 15 years, started as a sales rep, and what his goal was. That is very specific. Telling us his motivation is also specific. The next sentence reads, taking away this power from the store managers lessens their authority and makes them less able to adapt their store's specific needs. The action of taking away power and lessening authority is specific, but it doesn't say by how much. So, altogether, I'd say the first passage is more specific. Let me look at timeliness now. For this factor, I always like to scan for references to time and to look for outdated information. I don't see any dates in the first argument, and I don't see any in the second argument either. The only reference there is that the manager has been with the company for 15 years. But that reference to time isn't specific to this subject. So I can't really tell if the evidence is timely or not. Huh. A. Accurate. Okay. To check if evidence is accurate, I first look back to whether it's specific. If it's not specific, it's hard to tell if it's accurate. In the first argument, I can't verify accuracy for which companies have boosted morale or what the decrease in sick days was. I also can't verify the accuracy of any customer satisfaction rates because I can't tell where to begin looking for them. I can verify the accuracy of faster cellular sales numbers, though, so that's good. For the second manager, I can verify the accuracy of his time working for the company. I can't verify the accuracy of this statement, though. Taking away this power from the store managers lessens their authority and makes them less able to adapt their store's specific needs. How could I do that if I don't have any examples? It's hypothetical, so I can't verify it as either accurate or inaccurate, can I? Which brings me to the last element of the STAR support strategy, relevance. I mean, sure, I can verify the second manager's information with HR, but what does being with the company for 15 years have to do with knowing whether letting employees to vote on policy or not? Why should his motivation for becoming manager make a difference in deciding company policy? There's what I call a disconnect here. He wanted to make decisions for a store. Yes, but does that mean that letting employees vote on one policy isn't the right choice to make? Surely a manager makes many other crucial decisions for a store. I just don't see that his early history with the company is relevant here. I'm looking on my chart here, and I've got to say, it looks like argument 1 is coming up ahead so far. It's more specific, and all of its information is relevant to the topic at hand. Now, I'm going to see if I can find any fallacies. Fallacies, the argument killer. Yeah, I love looking for fallacies. They're tricky little devils, and sometimes I don't notice them right away. With shorter arguments, it's easier, and that's what we've got here. The way I look for fallacies is to go to parts in the argument that didn't have evidence. The glaring space for me is the second paragraph of the second argument. The entire paragraph tells what the group of managers should do, but an entire paragraph? It's a little fishy to me. Ah, look here. By acting like it is, we risk losing the competitive edge we've shown for years. If we do this now, what's next? Wearing miniskirts and tank tops to work? That's a great example of the slippery slope fallacy, saying that once we take one step down a path, the next and the next steps will be inevitable. That's not necessarily true. So it's not looking too good for argument number 2. In fact, it's not looking good at all. It's clear to me that argument number one is the stronger argument in all categories where there's not a tie between the two. Great. I won't waste any time. I'll start writing my argument right away. As I do, I need to make sure that my extended response follows the rubric that's used to score them. There are 3 dimensions on which responses will be scored. The first has to do with following the prompt specifically and using evidence to make an argument. The second has to do with organizing the argument and the quality of the evidence. The third has to do with conventions of English writing, spelling, grammar, punctuation. So, I want to make sure I'm writing with these dimensions in mind. Now, what is my assignment here again? The prompt tells me to write a response stating one argument is stronger, using evidence to explain why. Okay. With most writing tests, like the extended response, time is critical. When I'm working under a tight deadline like this, I like to be as clear and straightforward as possible with my responses. My writing may not be fancy, but I know that clear writing will score higher than complicated and confusing writing every time. I feel like I understand the prompt very well for this extended response. For a timed essay like this, I like to start with my claim, like the first argument did here. I'm going to open my essay stating exactly what I'm trying to prove. While both managers make a good case for voting their way, the first manager makes a stronger and more compelling argument. This way, I know that my claim is out there, clear for everyone to see and understand right away. No confusion. Great. Next, I'm going to give the strongest evidence to support this claim. Right away. No reason to wait. In timed essays, I don't put off to the end what I could put in the beginning, because what would happen if I ran out of time? No one would read it, because I wouldn't have had time to write it. So, in this case, my main evidence for the first essay being stronger is this. He cites evidence from a company similar in service and setup to show that it's both effective and the right thing to do. Allowing employees to vote on their scheduling policy does have a positive return on investment in employee loyalty and also sales figures. Granted, these sales figures are from a small sample of stores. There could be other causes for this increase in sales, unrelated to scheduling. I also want to make clear that part of the reason the first argument is stronger is because the second argument has many weaknesses. So, I'll include evidence showing why the second argument is weak. The second manager doesn't offer any real-world evidence at all. He simply relies on hypothetical what-ifs to make the case to keep the policy as it is. When the second manager argues his case, he uses his option as evidence. He is simply arguing that what he wanted is what all managers would want, and what would therefore be good for the company. What it sounds like is that keeping a tight leash on the store policy was good for that particular manager. In the third paragraph, and since I have time, I want to compare the arguments side by side and include more evidence from each. The evidence in the first argument is more specific, verifiable, and, if we are to take the manager at his word, is motivated by long-term company goals, both revenue and employee satisfaction. In fact, he even goes so far as to link these two. The second manager has no evidence that allowing managers to shape all policies in a store leads to either of those outcomes. I'm running out of time, which is fine, because in timed situations, I always try to focus on quality instead of quantity. It's worth taking the time to read, because although my response is on the short side, it meets the requirements of all 3 dimensions and explains with evidence which argument is stronger. I want to add a sentence at the end that restates the claim in different words. I think it helps the reader remember what I've been trying to prove and agree with my reasons. It's clear that the evidence offered by the first manager is more effective at supporting this claim. So, that's my response. I used all the time I was given. All in all, I feel really good about this response because I created a clear claim and I used evidence to support it. The last two steps in the writing process are to evaluate and submit, and that's what I'll do next. To evaluate my argument, I'll use the scoring rubric that test graders will use. These are divided into 3 dimensions. The first scores how well the response created a claim based on the prompt and evaluated the evidence. The second dimension scores how well the response develops and organizes an argument that supports the claim. The third dimension scores how well the writer follows standard English conventions in the argument. This includes the proper use of grammar, punctuation, and spelling. I'm going to evaluate my essay on these 3 dimensions before I submit it for grading. Is my claim clear and reasonable? Yes, I made sure of that by placing it at the beginning of my response. Is it based on the prompt? I think it is, because the prompt asked me to determine which argument is stronger, and that is what my prompt answers. The big question is, how well does the evidence I used back up the claim? To evaluate this, I need to make sure that every sentence that follows the claim actually supports the claim. My main evidence was this. He cites evidence from a company similar in service and setup to show that it's both effective and the right thing to do. Allowing employees to vote on their scheduling policy does have a positive return on investment in employee loyalty and also sales figures. I'm giving 2 reasons why the first argument is stronger than the second. Then, I use evidence to show that the second argument is weaker. Showing that the second argument is weaker helps to prove that the first argument is stronger. Let's look at the second dimension used to score responses. This scores responses on their development and organization. I organized my response like this. First, the claim. Second, the strengths of the first argument. Third, the weaknesses of the second argument. This isn't a complex organizational structure, and for a timed response, the simpler, the better. Now, to evaluate the third dimension, I need to look through the response with a fine-tooth comb. To do this, I'll read it for punctuation and grammar mistakes. When I proofread all my writing, I like to read it out loud. Of course, for the actual exam, students can't speak out loud. But if you can reread your response to yourself, you'll be more likely to find areas that need editing. Looking back on my response, I feel confident in what I will submit. At this point, I would submit it. Looking at the time I used, I think I wrote the best response I could. It may not be what I would write if I had a week to prepare it, but I think it answers the prompt. I've enjoyed sharing this process with you. Over the next few days, I'll be evaluating student responses to this prompt. I hope you get the chance to join me for that as well. In the meantime, keep your eyes peeled for arguments and keep writing.